Do you feel that true love always seems to slip through your fingers, as if something or someone were testing your patience, your devotion, and even your faith in love? What if these obstacles are not mere coincidences, but signs that the universe is preparing you for something greater, something real? Before encountering true love, you may go through repetitive situations, challenging encounters, and even relationships that seem to shape you from the inside out. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious guides us through symbolic paths until we are ready for wholeness. True love, therefore, does not arrive until we are complete. If you are experiencing strange situations in love, perhaps the universe is testing you. And when these signs appear, ignoring them can delay your meeting with what is most essential. Leave a comment saying, "I am ready to live love with awareness." Within Carl Jung's analytical psychology, love is not just a romantic feeling, but a profound mirror of our own unconscious. Before we can experience true love, we must go through a process of individuation, the path by which a human being becomes what they are in essence. The universe, in this symbolic context, presents itself as an agent of the psyche, testing us not to punish, but to prepare. The trials that arise before real love serve to reveal our shadow, the repressed, denied, or distorted aspects of ourselves that we often project onto others. Turbulent relationships, repetitive patterns, and feelings of emptiness are not accidents, but invitations to transformation. Projection, another central concept of Jung, makes us see in others what we do not recognize in ourselves. Platonic loves, intense passions, and frequent disappointments often indicate that we are seeking outside what is missing within. Until these projections are withdrawn and integrated, love cannot be lived consciously and fully. Jung also highlights the importance of integrating the animus and the anima, the masculine and feminine aspects within each of us. True love happens not when we look for the missing half in another, but when two whole individuals meet. The universe, then, places us before trials that demand balance, self-knowledge, and emotional courage. These signs that precede true love are not punishments, but invitations to awakening. They show us that love is not something we merely find, but something we sustain after a profound inner journey. It is common to believe that certain encounters are just chance, when in fact, many of them have deep roots in the unconscious. Carl Jung observed that we attract, seemingly involuntarily, people and situations that reflect our shadow, the collection of all that we reject in ourselves. Before real love manifests, the universe often leads us into karmic relationships that feel more like emotional labyrinths than safe harbors. Symbolically, these encounters serve to reveal hidden parts of our being. Karmic relationships are not just difficult, they are intense, magnetic, and charged with lessons and repetitions. The person who enters our life in these moments often activates old traumas, uncontrolled emotions, and unconscious patterns that repeat like a cycle we cannot break. This does not happen by chance. These relationships act as living mirrors of what must be healed within us. The repetition of certain types of partners, the same conflicts with different faces, the feeling of "I've lived this before," all of this points to a symbolic movement of the unconscious, bringing forth an unacknowledged shadow. Jung teaches that when the contents of the shadow are not integrated, they manifest externally through projection. In other words, what disturbs us in others is often a reflection of something in us that is being denied. The universe, by allowing these difficult encounters, offers us the chance to see clearly what we usually try to hide: fear of abandonment, feelings of inadequacy, emotional dependency, control, rejection, jealousy, insecurity. Each karmic relationship is a key piece in revealing these deep wounds. These painful dynamics may seem punitive at first, but their function is preparatory. They force us to revisit our beliefs about love, about worthiness, and above all about the value we give ourselves. Suffering, in this sense, acts as a catalyst for awareness. Only after recognizing these patterns and taking emotional responsibility for them can we break the cycle and open ourselves to something new. Often these relationships end abruptly or traumatically, not because love has ended, but because the lesson has been learned. The universe removes what has already fulfilled its purpose. The problem is that without awareness, we tend to repeat the cycle with someone else. That is why it is essential to look at these relationships with honesty and depth, asking, what did this experience teach me about myself? Which part of my shadow was revealed here? As we integrate these answers, something shifts within us. Projection gradually dissolves, and we begin to see others with more clarity and less idealization. We stop seeking someone to fill a void and start building a love that is more real, rooted in truth and emotional maturity. At this point, the universe's tests begin to give way to genuine opportunities for connection. Jung affirms that what we do not face in our unconscious appears in our life as fate, and that is exactly what karmic relationships represent, the unconscious trying to be heard through our love destiny. When we finally hear this message, we break the compulsion to repeat and become ready for a love that is not based on need, but on wholeness. Therefore, if you have been living stories that seem different in form, but identical in emotional content, it is a sign that the shadow is still active, seeking integration. These patterns are not coincidence or curse. They are symbolic calls to awakening. True love demands preparation, and this preparation is often painful. But when we understand the deeper meaning of these relationships, we stop seeing them as failures and recognize them instead as invisible bridges toward a more conscious and transformative love. On the journey to true love, solitude is not a punishment, but a rite of passage. Carl Jung saw solitude not as isolation, but as an essential stage in individuation, the path by which the individual becomes whole within themselves. Contemporary culture, however, sees being alone as failure, as an absence of love. Yet from a symbolic and Jungian perspective, solitude represents the womb of psychic transformation, the place where the soul is gestated for something greater. When the universe distances us from romantic ties, it is offering a sacred space for rediscovering what has been forgotten, our essence. Solitude allows for the silence necessary to truly listen to oneself. In silence, hidden truths, real desires, and untreated wounds emerge. Without this deep listening, we continue to seek others as an escape from ourselves. We look for love as an anesthetic for emptiness, not as a communion between two whole beings. Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Solitude confronts us with this darkness and invites us to illuminate it with presence and self-compassion. At this stage, we are often seized by the anguish of waiting, by the sense that time is passing and love is not arriving. But what is truly happening is that the universe is preparing us, stripping us of masks and illusions. When we are alone, the games of seduction cease, the mirrors fade, and we stand before our own truth. There is no role to perform, no character to sustain. There is only the bare self, with its strengths and vulnerabilities, waiting to be embraced. This process is vital because true love requires authenticity, and there is no authenticity without self-knowledge. When we go through long periods without romantic involvement, the unconscious is leading us to a deeper stage of integration. We are being prepared to stop seeking in others what can only be found within. Solitude becomes a temple where we learn to love ourselves genuinely, not as a substitute for another's love, but as the foundation for any healthy relationship. Jung also teaches that each person carries within themselves unconscious images of the masculine and the feminine, the animus and the anima, that deeply influence our choices in love. In solitude, we have the opportunity to recognize these images and stop confusing them with real people. We learn to distinguish what is projection from what is presence, and thus we cease to search for the father or mother in our partners and begin to seek the companion, the equal. This solitary stage is often uncomfortable because it shakes our identity. Without another to define us, who are we? Without a relationship to validate us, what remains? And it is precisely here that the psychological gold of individuation lies. We discover that we are whole, even when incomplete, that we are worthy of love, even without loving someone else, and that true love does not come to fill a void, but to overflow from a heart already full. The universe, by creating this pause in love, signals that it is time to stop seeking and start cultivating. The absence of the other is the presence of an inner task. What seems like an interval is, in truth, a rehearsal for the main scene. It is in this space that we learn to be companions to ourselves, to tend to our own wounds, to console ourselves without external dependency. And only when we can inhabit this solitude with serenity do we become truly ready for conscious love. This preparation is like winter before spring. It may seem cold and desolate, but it is there that the seeds of true encounter are being nurtured. When love arrives, it will not find lack, but presence. It will not meet fear, but maturity. And the relationship that grows from this fertile ground will be unlike anything lived before, not based on need, but on the free choice between two whole beings. Solitude, therefore, is a powerful sign that something is being healed, realigned, and restructured. It is a test of trust in life, in the soul, and in the timing of the universe. Whoever crosses this stage with awareness also crosses the threshold between immature love and real love. One of the most transformative principles in Carl Jung's psychology is the idea of projection. He states that we project onto others everything we do not recognize in ourselves, whether qualities we admire or aspects we reject and fear. In love, this manifests even more intensely. Often we do not fall in love with the real person, but with the symbolic image they represent in our unconscious. And it is precisely at this point that the universe begins to test us, by placing in front of us figures that reflect our fantasies, traumas, unspoken desires, and above all, our unhealed wounds. These encounters are not accidental. The other becomes a mirror not only of our qualities, but also of what still remains unconscious. Instead of truly knowing the other, we often fall into the trap of seeing only what we want to see, an idealization, a savior, an emotional refuge. The universe, however, allows this illusion to endure only until it becomes unsustainable, and it is in the collapse of this projected image that the test reveals itself. Relationships that begin with almost mystical intensity and end in deep frustration are clear signs of projection. The person seemed perfect, then suddenly became unrecognizable. What changed? Perhaps nothing, except the end of the illusion. What collapsed was not true love, but the unconscious fantasy. And here lies the symbolic proposal of the universe, to use the other as a mirror so we can finally see ourselves. Jung points out that projections are inevitable, but not permanent. They are part of the natural process of psychological development. The problem arises when we refuse to remove them, insisting on seeing the other as the hero or villain of a story we ourselves unconsciously wrote. When we do not recognize that we are projecting, we react with anger, disappointment, attachment, or rejection, without realizing that we are, in truth, running from parts of ourselves revealed in that human mirror. It is at these moments that the universe intensifies its tests. It places us face to face with the type of person who activates precisely what needs to be seen in us: insecurity, fear of abandonment, need for control, self-denial, pride. The intensity of these encounters is not a sign that it is meant to be, but rather that it is meant to be seen. The other provokes us, enchants us, or wounds us not by accident, but because in some way they are embodying something within us that remains unhealed. These tests also show us how ready we are to love someone for who they truly are, not for who we project them to be. When projection is removed, the other becomes visible in both light and shadow. And likewise, we too become visible, which requires vulnerability, emotional honesty, and the willingness to grow. Removing projections is one of the most painful but also most liberating steps on the path to real love. By understanding this, we begin to see relationships as therapeutic scenarios, where the universe, through the mirror of the other, shows us where we still need to work. Instead of asking, "Why did this person hurt me?" we start to ask, "What is this experience showing me about myself?" This shift in perspective is a key to breaking patterns and opening space for more authentic connections. Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And transformation is only possible when there is mutual recognition, not of fantasies, but of inner realities. The love that arises after the removal of projections is quieter, more mature, more human. It is not blind, but sees with clarity. And it is this clarity that the universe seeks to teach us before allowing true love to blossom. So if you feel that you have lived through intense relationships that end in confusion, or if you tend to idealize people and then be disappointed, the universe may be showing that projections still need to be withdrawn. These tests are not failures, but symbolic invitations to awaken consciousness. And the more awake we are, the more capable we become of loving, not the idea of the other, but the other in their totality. In Jung's analytical psychology, true love is impossible without individuation, the ongoing and profound path through which the human being becomes what they truly are. This process is not about reaching perfection, but about integrating the inner polarities that, when unrecognized, fragment us and make us seek outside what is missing within. Love then ceases to be a casual encounter and becomes a natural consequence of our wholeness. And this wholeness only manifests when the integration of animus and anima occurs, the archetypes of the masculine and feminine present in each of us. These archetypes are not social roles or superficial traits, but symbolic expressions of the collective unconscious. The animus within the woman represents qualities such as reason, objectivity, action, and strength of direction. The anima within the man symbolizes sensitivity, intuition, emotion, and receptivity. When these aspects are repressed or distorted, the search for love becomes an unconscious attempt to find in another what is not recognized in oneself. That is why so many relationships become codependent, unbalanced, or frustrating, because they are based on archetypal lack rather than real communion. Jung observed that until we integrate these inner polarities, we are destined to project them onto our partners. We look for the man who represents our idealized animus, strong, protective, intelligent, structured, or the woman who embodies our dreamed anima, welcoming, intuitive, gentle, inspiring. The problem arises when the other cannot match this inner image, because no one can sustain the projection of an unconscious archetype forever. The gap between fantasy and reality leads to frustration, blame, and often rupture. Integrating these archetypes does not mean eliminating desire for the other, but ceasing to seek in them the completeness that can only be built internally. A woman who has integrated her animus develops self-confidence, assertiveness, and mental clarity. She does not depend on a man to feel safe or guided. A man who has integrated his anima becomes more empathetic, intuitive, and emotionally available, without projecting onto a woman the role of being his sole channel of sensitivity. This inner integration enables us to love without possessiveness, without idealization, and without fear of losing the other, because there is no longer an archetypal void to fill. The universe, in guiding each person through individuation, is preparing the inner ground for real love to flourish. And as with every profound process, this journey is full of tests, ruptures, reflections, and rebirths. Often, the absence of relationships or the repetition of encounters that do not last are not failures but signs that there is still inner work to be done. The universe does not deny true love. It simply waits until we are prepared to sustain it with maturity and awareness. Individuation, in this sense, is the antidote to romantic illusion. It invites us to love without losing individuality, to surrender without dissolving, to build without imprisoning. True love is not fusion, but communion. It is not the sum of two halves, but the meeting of two wholes. And this meeting only becomes possible when the psyche is sufficiently integrated, when we no longer expect the other to save us, but see them as a companion on the journey, not as a missing piece, but as a reflection of our completeness. This is why, from the Jungian perspective, real love is an expression of the self, the organizing center of the psyche, symbol of wholeness and the union of opposites. When the self begins to manifest, we attract people who are on the same vibrational level of consciousness. Relationships stop being battlefields and become spaces of mutual growth. Partnership becomes a spiritual practice where each helps the other grow without trying to mold them to personal expectations. Therefore, if you feel that the universe is delaying true love, perhaps it is actually leading you to a more advanced stage of yourself. The integration of animus and anima is not a final destination, but a continuous process of maturation. Each challenge, each solitude, each frustration in love can be a symbolic call to deepen this journey. Real love arrives when we are ready, not when we give up, but when we become whole. The journey to true love does not begin with the encounter with another, but with the deep dive into oneself. Each challenging relationship, each moment of solitude, each dissolved projection, and each shadow faced is part of a greater plan, the construction of a whole human being capable of loving with awareness, freedom, and presence. The universe does not test us to punish, but to reveal us. And love, when it finally arrives, is no longer a desperate search, but a calm recognition of two souls that have already learned to walk alone. True love does not arrive before its time. It respects the soul's rhythm, the pace of individuation, and the wisdom of the unconscious. When you understand this, waiting ceases to be suffering and becomes preparation, and then everything changes. If this content has spoken to you in any way, subscribe to the channel to continue your journey of self-knowledge and emotional awareness. And don't forget to watch the next video appearing on the screen. It may be the next step in your process of inner awakening. Transformation begins when you choose to look within.